What's up troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and finally today I can bring you some Battlefield 1 closed alpha gameplay and some impressions. The NDA or non-disclosure agreement has been dropped and I can discuss the game in full detail now, which is fantastic. Now this is the first video I'm going to be making on Battlefield 1. I'm going to do lots over the coming days, talking about weapons, talking about classes, maps, things that are going on in general in the game, but at the moment I just wanted to give you my initial closed alpha impressions. Mostly the positives and negatives about it as a whole, and just give you guys an overall feel of how I feel the game is at this relatively early stage. Closed alpha can be considered quite an early stage as a whole. Now, Battlefield 1's closed alpha, in my opinion, has been a pretty outstanding success thus far, and I have a number of reasons behind that, and it has to do a lot with what's going on in the game, but also what's going on behind scenes as well, that has kind of created this wholesome experience that I'm really enjoying at the moment, and I can see myself enjoying for quite some time. So I'm going to go through the positive and negatives, and I'm going to start off with all the positives that I found thus far. So first of all, it runs like a dream. There are very few issues with Battlefield 1 as a whole, especially on the PC side of things. I haven't tried out the console version of the alpha just yet, but graphically it runs fantastically. I'm using a 970 and an i7 4790K, and I'm getting between 80 to 120 frames per second on high/ultra settings, which is outstanding. So it's clear that it's taken the performance improvements that we saw in Star Wars Battlefront, and my only suggestion really is that bumping up to 16 gigs of RAM for those of you who are still running on 8 might be an ideal suggestion. It runs like a dream. Server-wise, I haven't noticed any major issues in terms of netcode and problems here and there. It's running at 60 Hz on PC at the moment, which is fantastic. We have that straight out the doors, and I haven't noticed any major netcode issues whatsoever at this point in time, playing on Irish servers, which are only, I think, a 30 millisecond delay away from me, which is really good. So performance has been nailed down, which was a huge concern about this game. It was such a bold and big adventure. We have pretty much completely destructible maps and ground deformation and just a lot going on in general, dynamic weather, many calculations for the server and the game to run itself, which led me to believe that perhaps it could become unstable, but those have been put to rest in as early a phase as closed alpha, which I'm really impressed about. Now let's talk about in-game positives, and my first one has to be the Bad Company 2 feel to this game, and that sounds like a big bold statement to make, but the game's destructible environments, how everything runs, how everything flows, just feels so much like the game I'm used to in Bad Company 2. Everything's entirely destructible in this game. There are a few buildings here and there that you can't tear down, some of them mostly objectives, but literally everything falls apart, even the ground, and it's incredibly impressive to see. And it's not the kind of destruction which is random or some kind of animation. It's procedurally done. You hit the top left roof of a building, the top left roof will cave in. It's not the entire roof that suddenly goes kaboom. And it was outstandingly impressive to watch in-game, and you guys are going to have lots of really huge wow moments when you're playing, when suddenly this front of a tank just bursts through the opening of a building and that all comes crashing down, and it's really insane to see, and I was very impressed with that element as a whole. The movement system, in my opinion, looks great. It appears that they have very much taken the Star Wars Battlefront movement system, thrown in some extra animations, and everything's very snappy, and the character models look very movable. They look like they're actually dynamic for once, as opposed to constantly being in set animations. And it looks really good when a player's sort of dying around a corner or climbing over a wall, because the animations are so free flow in terms of the environment, which I think looks outstanding. The next thing that I was worried about, which they have managed to put to rest, was the influence of vehicles in the game. They are done incredibly well. The spawn system, I believe, is a working spawn system that works effectively. It stops stealing of vehicles, it also stops general problems, and the fact that they have their own classes now works very seamlessly as well. If you get in a tank, be very much aware that you are going to be handicapped as an infantry player. It's just a very fine-tuned level of balance that I appreciate, and for once I feel like there is a clear distinction between vehicle and infantryman, which makes each to their own much more important. One thing I have noticed as well is that tanks do take skill to take down. This is something I have been waiting for so long, and I saw Level Cap in a recent video say that tanks were too OP and, you know, there wasn't enough to destroy them and blah, but in all honesty, that's what I wanted. Tanks haven't been a proper threat in Battlefield for God knows how long now. Tanks weren't a real threat in Battlefield since Bad Company 2, and for now, it actually takes a certain level of skill to get rid of a tank. You either have to get close enough with an entire squad of people who are coordinated together to take it down progressively with tank grenades and launchers, or you can put it in the line of fire of a plane, or even the behemoth, or even a ground cannon. But it takes skill. It's not something, let me just whip out this RPG and kaboom, it's gone. It takes a certain dynamic level of team play to take down a vehicle, which in my opinion is much more beneficial to the overall feel of Battlefield, especially when you're trying to incentivize a division between infantry and vehicle, which they have done very well with the lesser classes with the vehicle users. And it just seems to me that the entire Battlefield as a whole has been very reshaped in terms of classes. This is something I was quite impressed with, although I do have some gripes in terms of balancing that I'm going to talk about in a minute. The medic class, in my opinion, is incredibly appealing due to the fact of the semi-automatic rifles. I think they're outstanding weapons to use, and they all have their own sort of dynamics to them that make them quite interesting. Some are a bit more hard-hitting and slower, some are very pacey and a bit more inaccurate, but they seem to have balanced it in a way which to a degree makes sense, but like I say, I do have a few issues here and there. The Assault class has a nice little combination of assault SMGs mixed with engineer-styled explosives, and in my opinion that has worked very well. It limits them to a certain level of engagement. You can't go really anything beyond close to mid-range. If you try that, you will get killed. But that just seems to make sense. No longer are we seeing Ace 23s overpower a sniper rifle from 200 meters away. It's a case that we have an SMG now which is struggling to beat a sniper rifle at range, which is how things should be, and it just makes more sense. The support class has some really good weapons too. The LMGs, in my opinion, seem relatively balanced. I do have some issues with them here and there, but as a whole, they seem like actual support weapons. They're a bit more inaccurate, which I appreciate, a lot more slow firing in terms of fire rate, which makes sense for the time period, and they're hard hitting too, so don't expect for an LMG to be a weakling Type 88 style weapon anymore. It's been a bit of a change up. As for snipers, I've been very concerned about the balancing of them, but they've seemed to have pulled this off very well. If you have below 10 health, believe me, a sniper will take you down in one shot. And I feel like this has been a good level of balancing on DICE's part, because they've messed around with the engagement ranges so that if you're too close to the infantry, the damage drop off is pretty bad, and if you're too far, the damage drop off is also pretty bad. So you kind of have to get in the sort of 200 to 300 meter range to really be effective, and in that, in my opinion, just makes the sniper class as a whole more strategic and more useful. And there's been lots of instances where I've been up on hills, putting myself in a good engagement range distance to out-snipe any other weapons that are on the field, and it just seems to be so much more fluid. You guys can't really understand the descriptions I'm trying to make here until you actually play the game. Each class seems that they're so fine-tuned to what they're supposed to do. Medics are supposed to be medics, they can engage mid-range. Assault is supposed to take on close quarters, and they can do that effectively. And support is supposed to be able to be a multi-versatile kind of piece of equipment that's a bit less accurate but has a bit more firepower, and it just works. It works nicely, and that's what I've been enjoying so far, is that each class has a purpose, and those purposes are clearly defined, and those purposes are reinforced by the way vehicles work and the way the maps work and the map design, which is my next positive actually. And I sound like I'm really taken away here, and it's because I am. I've been really enjoying this alpha, and you know, it's so good to see Battlefield, in my opinion, at one of its finer moments. The thing about map design that I was just about to dive into is that it's been perfected so well in this map. There are a few issues in terms of where the capture points are and whether the land is kind of sloped down, which benefits one team. But as a whole, I have to say, the overall map design has made sense. You know, you go from these big open fields of long to mid-range engagements to these really close quarter towns, and you're going to see sort of like building to building firefights and people whipping out snipers on top of the top floor of the house and breaking out the windows to try and take people down when they run across this huge sort of like cross section between the roads. And it's just so fluid, you know, you're running all of a sudden through a field and you're sniping somebody, and then the next moment after you've died or you decide to change class, you're running forward with an SMG or a semi-automatic rifle trying to get through a town and engage enemies there, and it just works incredibly seamlessly. Now onto the slightly darker side of things, the negatives. I feel as though the planes, their handling needs improvement. At the moment, it's very kind of... I don't know how to describe it. Like, 1 second it seems very responsive and kind of like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But then all of a sudden, like half a second later, you're just like, well, what the fuck are you trying to do, plane? Because I'm not quite sure. And that's not even with damage. Once you sustain some damage, you may as well just forget entirely about actually flying your plane. It just, unless you can heal it, which is also a very challenging thing to do, so don't worry too much about self-healing. It's just an absolute misery to try and fly, and I feel like that needs a lot of working on. The next one is balancing as a whole between the classes, and I know at the moment I've said that they seem to fit their roles very well, and they do, but there are some clear weaknesses between the classes. Now the Assault class, although being fantastic at close quarters and alright at medium range, just doesn't really have the stopping power at the moment. You know, I've seen moments where I feel like I've sunk, you know, half a mag, maybe a bit more into a player, and they're still alive, and that's just because they were either too far or they weren't, you know, they were running around quite quickly and the odd bullet here and there missed, and you can expect to put a decent amount of bullets into these people before they go down. And it's really problematic because the second you get anywhere sort of beyond, I'd say, the 50 to 80 meter mark, at the moment the SMGs seem very weak, and I'd like to see their accuracy or either their stopping power improved just a little bit to kind of put them up in comparison to the semi-automatic rifles. My next gripe is that sniper rifles can be a bit strange. They don't seem to have a very fast reload time, and that's a good thing but also a bad thing in some respects, because I feel like with the semi-automatic rifles on the field, the sniper rifles can't be so slow that a semi-auto could kill somebody in 3 shots before they have the chance to load a second round in. So that's something that they could potentially look at. My next one is the incendiary grenades, because this is something which doesn't really make sense at the moment. Everybody has a gas mask, and a gas mask and an incendiary grenade, a gas grenade and an incendiary grenade do the same purpose. You know, you throw it somewhere, it disperses enemies, and if they're inside, they take damage. But whilst everybody has a defense against the gas grenades, they don't have a defense against the incendiary grenades, so it makes more sense just to naturally use the incendiary grenades because no one can defend against it. So, in my opinion, you should either get more gas grenades or it should have a much larger spread, and I feel like that would increase its effectiveness. But overall, I'm really impressed with the alpha, and it's been something that has been a real surprise for me, because I felt like I came into it with a lot of things that I was annoyed about or potentially worried about, and they were brushed off really quickly. And I feel like if we see this continuing trend of general enjoyment, which is what I would describe Battlefield 1 as at the moment, a fun and enjoyable game, but it can also be a very tactical and very serious game, I feel like they're onto a winning formula, and as long as they listen to the feedback and make some adjustments here and there, I'm sure we're going to have a really good game by launch. So guys, that's it for this quick impressions video. There is much more on the way. I'm going to be doing everything from looking at the different kinds of weapons in the game, to looking at the graphics, to... I don't really know at the moment. I'm just kind of going through ideas that I really want to do. Also, I can finally do some Tales from the Battlefield, actually featuring Battlefield 1 footage! Finally. Yes, so that's about it for today's video. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon in another video.